some dare call it conspiracy.
Welcome to the Some Dare Call It Conspiracy podcast, hosted by Brent Lee and Neil Sanders. After nearly 20 years exploring the world of conspiracy culture, we are taking our guests and listeners on a guided tour of the rabbit hole. Our mission? To discover where the truth lies. So welcome to part 4 of the ongoing saga of Kate Shemirani. And we're now on to July the 2nd. And as you may remember, there's an upcoming inquest into the untimely death of Paloma Shemirani, who died aged, sadly, very young, aged 23. And the consensus from the NHS was that she died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. However, Kate Shemirani has different ideas. And on July the 2nd, she went on the Resistance podcast, and the Resistance podcast entitled this interview, "How the NHS Killed Her Daughter." And you must remember that recently there's been a Panorama show exposing the accusations against Kate. And Kate says that basically the Panorama show was a complete fantasy. And she accuses them of attempting to pervert the course of justice because in her mind, they are covering up for the NHS who murdered her daughter with an overdose of adrenaline, even though technically that was actually what revived her. And she then went to a hospital where sadly she died about a week later. But Kate also says that she's been receiving death threats since the Panorama show, although she doesn't elaborate on how or why, and or where, by which I mean whether she's getting them through Twitter or whether somebody's phoning her or what. But she says that this is kind of a sort of occupational hazard, particularly if you're a professional that's turned whistleblower in what could be termed the conspiracy world. And she references somebody as a sort of an example to bolster her position on this. Do you want to have a guess who she references? Russell Brand?
Not quite, no. She references the former Dr. Cartland, now simply known as Mr. Cartland. And she basically says that due to stress from the lying press, not only was he struck off because of his bold stance against the evil of the COVID vaccines, which Kate says kill you, but also that recently she puts his business on Front Street, to be quite honest. She says that she was told that Dr. Cartland was found on the kitchen floor, unresponsive by his wife. And so an air ambulance had to be sent in order to get him. And she intimates very strongly that this was a suicide attempt, although whether it was or not, who knows? But the problem with this is that she actually says that he was struck off for his stance on COVID-19 and the vaccine. And that simply isn't true. What he was struck off for was 17 proven allegations, which included harassment of fellow professionals. Between 2022 and 2025, Cartland engaged in threatening and harassing behavior towards 3 doctors and a practice manager across social media on platforms like X, Instagram, Getter, and Telegram. So he was pestering these people from all sorts of different things and also spreading lies about them. This included posting or reposting content that caused alarm or distress, such as accusing one doctor of paedophilic sympathies and another of having an interest in having sex with animals. He also created fake profiles on Twitter in the name of one of his victims to post stuff that one assumes would be there to sully the reputation of this person. By him then showing these tweets and going, oh, look at this disgusting behavior by this person that I happen to be harassing. He also showed hostility towards the LGBTQ community. Cartland's actions included posts motivated by hostility towards the LGBTQ community, such as sharing an image stating Pride Month can fuck off. and comments mocking non-binary individuals. And he did a Quasimodo on this. He cited his Christian beliefs as justification for persecuting other human beings. You know, he decided that that obscure passage in what is it, fucking Leviticus or something like that, that's what we're going to, whilst wearing mixed fabrics and probably like eating many cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But to ignore the things about treating your fellow man like you would want to be treated yourself, and judge not lest ye be judged. Fucked off those parts of Christianity because they didn't suit his purpose.
Oh, what, the Jesus parts?
The Jesus parts, yeah, fuck the Jesus parts. We want the wrathful Old Testament shit. That's the stuff that we're talking about. Unless, of course, it happens to encapsulate us in their wacky shit, in which case we ignore it. But basically, the tribunal found that his actions constituted harassment and were completely incompatible with professional standards. He also was completely dishonest regarding COVID vaccine exemptions, and this also came up in the tribunal. Cartland offered to provide COVID-19 exemption certificates to individuals without medical justification, which undermined the exemption system. For example, in September 2023, he indicated he would list medical exemption for anyone to acknowledge bodily autonomy, which the tribunal deemed dishonest and serious misconduct. He also encouraged online harassment. He posted the personal details of a fellow doctor to encourage his 300,000 ex-followers. Actually, he hasn't got 300,000. A huge amount of them are bots, probably that he's bought himself, the pathetic shit. But he still encouraged his followers to pile on and to harass people. And this was because she rejected his job application. And so rather than act like an adult or a professional, what he decided to do was get people to harass this person, which was deemed as a further escalation of his misconduct. So Dr. Cartland is not a hero, nor is he a whistleblower. He's a stupid person that decided to sacrifice his professional reputation, his job, and his children's secure futures, because he preferred to get praise from fucking idiots on the internet, because his ego is more important to him than professionalism or the continuation of a career, even if it affects those that he holds dearest and nearest. And that is who Kate decides to bring up in order to sort of compare herself to. And I think that's apt, because in both of these cases, what we're actually seeing is somebody's ego destroying opportunities for their children.
I would like to add one important thing about Cartland, and that is that he is a bellend.
Absolutely. Yeah, fuck that man. Fuck him in the ear. Anyway, KS also says that COVID was caused by, do you want to know? Obviously, we know this.
5G.
5G. And she knows this because basically Wuhan was the trial city for 5G. It was the only trial city that she says, and that correlated and coincided exactly with the rise of COVID. But there's a problem with this theory. It didn't. Wuhan didn't have total 5G coverage. It did have some, but it wasn't the first. Cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Zhangzhou, and Hangzhou had all had almost total 5G coverage. And some of those cities had 5G coverage before Wuhan. So logically, if that was the cause of COVID, it wouldn't have shown up in Wuhan first. So the very first step, her theory seems to, disintegrate because it's stupid. And speaking of stupid, she also decides that again, to reiterate her support that Lucy Letby is innocent, Beverly Allett, another nurse who murdered babies, is innocent, and also that Harold Shipman is innocent. Harold Shipman, widely regarded,
Wow.
Harold Shipman, widely regarded to be one of the worst serial killers in English history, who actually went to the same school as my dad, though that's not connected. She decides that, yeah, he's absolutely innocent. She doesn't say why, but this is what she feels. She goes on to say that when she was fined for her COVID breaches, she received 3 fines of £600 each, which is somehow connected to Satan. She also said that she had right. She also said that she had costs of £180, and she says that 180. So if you remove the 0 and you think of how you get to 18, it's an encoded. Yeah, it's an encoded 666. And she says that this is proof that the British government is satanic and that they were essentially mocking her when they issued these fines. But there is a problem with this. That's just not true. Like, as we spoke about this in previous episodes, Cheyenne from BBC Verify had reported that she was fined £1,875. So she's just fibbing to make herself seem more interesting, which is silly. She then goes on to say that the COVID vaccines were experimental and not tested, which is simply not true. And she says that the doctors and nurses killed people with morphine, and that they also all knew that the vaccines killed, but none of them cared, because the doctors and nurses who administered these vaccines apparently got huge financial incentives to stay quiet and obviously to go along with the mass murder of, well, everybody almost, really. Like, and there's a number of reasons that, again, this theory falls down. One, that's stupid and there's no evidence to support it. Why is the only whistleblower to this fact somebody that wasn't involved in this? Are you telling me that not a single doctor or nurse in the entire country had a conscience and went, I don't want to be involved in this mass murder? Some might say that, well, they were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. It's like, so that's what's stopping them from, like, blowing the whistle on the mass murder and the government sort of, culling operation that went on. It's like, well, my conscience is one thing, but I don't want to be civilly liable. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, it's just made up, isn't it, to be quite honest? And also this concept of financial incentives is just simply not true. She's mashing together the concept that in America, when COVID patients were treated, money went into the system. And it's like, that's because the American system works like that. It's an insurance-based company. So when anyone gets treated for anything, money is given to pay for it. And that was misinterpreted willfully to say, oh, the doctors pocket that. Oh, the nurses pocket that. As if, like, they were in some sort of scheme where, well, you really need to pull up your numbers, Carol. You've only murdered 50 people. June here has murdered 75. And so she's on the leaderboard and looking to get a set of steak knives at the end of the month. Like, it's beyond belief. It's so stupid. But she was told that, now, do you want to know why some people didn't die from the COVID vaccine?
Placebos?
Somewhat, yeah. And she doesn't explain whether this was because of good doctors and nurses sort of getting involved, or whether this was due to the evil government trying to hide their tracks. But she said that she knows that what was happening was some of the vaccines were getting watered down. They were getting diluted. Like if your Vimto was too strong, that's what they were doing to negate the lethality of these vaccines. She doesn't say which vaccine, because obviously, again, there were lots of different types and such like that. But anyway, she also says that she's been told that doctors are treating vaccine damaged patients privately whilst continuing to make their day jobs. And off the back of this secret cottage industry of treating the vaccine damaged, they're making up to £9,000 a day, exploiting these poor people that they themselves damage with these vaccines. She doesn't provide any evidence to this, but that's what she says. She goes on to say that, like, we know that governments around the world will do things like this because in the 1970s, in the United States of America, the Department of Defense made a deadly compound that was sent all over the world, and it was proven to cause incidents of leukemia, lymphoma, and also AIDS, which is pretty fucking impressive because they're completely different things. But anyway, I think she doesn't elaborate. I think she's talking about something that was called the I'm going to butcher this, Serratia Marcensens experiment, which is Serratia Marcescens. This was a thing. But in a now famous expose, the US government released S. Marcescens over both civilian population centers and military training areas from the late 1940s to the mid 1960s in hopes of gathering data on the potential spread of bioterrorism agents used against the United States. These experiments were unearthed by investigative journalism in the mid 1970s, prompting a congressional investigation that studied the US government testing on the public. In the meantime, S. Marcescens was revealed to be a pathogen capable of causing a full spectrum of clinical disease from urinary tract infections to pneumonia. S. Marcescens is now an accepted clinical pathogen and a multi-antibiotic, which is resistant, a multi-antibiotic resistant isolate. So what this thing is a bacterium that has been used in various experiments, including biological warfare simulations as a tracer organism in medical studies. So it's got like a red pigmentation, and apparently this makes it quite easy to identify. So it's useful in tracking its spread in experiments, although it is a known pathogen known to cause a range of infections. And it was used in several experiments. One called Operation Sea Spray. In 1950, the US Navy conducted a secret biological warfare experiment called Operation Sea Spray, where they released S. marcescens over the San Francisco Bay Area to study the spread of bacteria in an urban environment. Now, the purpose was to understand how vulnerable cities were to biological weapons attacks. Now, whilst the Navy claimed the bacteria was harmless, some individuals in San Francisco developed unusual infections, and one person died, leading to controversy and questions about the experiment's safety. But it wasn't clear that this was the cause. And this was made public in the 1970s, which basically sparked an investigation into other government testing on the public. It's used as a tracer organism. So before the pathogen nature of Serratia marcescens was fully understood, it was used in medical and other experiments to track the spread of microbes in various situations. These situations included tracking the spread of germs during dental work or in other scenarios where airborne transmissions were being studied. The understanding of S. marcescens as a pathogen developed over time, with studies revealing its ability to cause various infections, including urinary tract infections, pneumonia, and even potentially meningitis outbreaks. What was it that Kate said that it caused when they experimented on people in the 1970s?
AIDS?
Yes. Now that's, and various types of cancer, which is not true. And it also wasn't carried out in the 70s. That's when it was revealed to the public. No, there was bad outcomes to it, but she's hyping it up essentially. It's now recognized as a clinical pathogen, and it's got multi-antibiotic resistant strains. But despite its history, research continues on Serratia marcescens, including studies on its ability to survive in different environments, its interaction with the human immune system, and its role in infections. And the understanding the behavior and pathogenicity of Serratia marcescens is important for preventing and treating infections caused by this bacterium, including something called nosocomial infections. So again, she's just hyped that up because she's vague enough so that nobody will go and check. Now, don't get me wrong, the American government and no doubt other governments have done dreadful things to people, including spreading actual pathogens out, on subway systems, and also driving around pumping them out of the back of cars as part of certain MK Ultra experiments. Let's not forget the worst is the fact that they killed a lot of people by essentially blowing up nuclear bombs downwind from where they lived. Not only people in the military that were there to sort of observe these tests and essentially to be human guinea pigs, but also to civilians who just happened to be in the sort of draft of the radioactive material. So don't get us wrong. We're not saying that the American government has never killed its own civilians. Like, it absolutely has, but that is not a great example to use. There's better. She goes on to tell the same story of asking for Paloma's histology. But she, and again, this will be important as we go on, but she adds, for some strange reason, just before I left, when I'd asked them about the histology and the bloods, I wanted them to absolutely assure me that my daughter was for resuscitation. And the doctor, senior house officer, Dr. Christine Anderson, he turned the entire screen around, the computer screen on a mobile screen, and he showed me that every single patient in the unit, I mean, talk about a breach of confidentiality. And right across, I could see that every patient on the entire ward had do not resuscitate. So what we're supposed to believe there is that basically not only as the doctor breached the confidentiality of all these patients, but that all of these patients, regardless of the severity of their condition, were down for do not resuscitate, which, you know, big if true. She then goes on to say that rasburicase, which is the drug that she claims has triggered the conditions that ultimately led to Paloma's health deteriorating, is a newly licensed and very dangerous drug. Do you want to know when it was first used in the USA? 2002. So it's not a newly licensed, nor is it. I mean, you could make the argument that all and every medicine can be dangerous in the wrong doses and used in the wrong way, but it certainly isn't considered new, nor is it considered particularly dangerous. She then goes on to say, these people saying, oh, it's an 80% survival rate. Please do your due diligence. Forget the 80%. Put 5 people around a table. That's 100%. Kill 20% of them, and you're going to kill 1 in 5. That's a big number. Now, I'm no mathematician, but I think that there's a flaw in her logic there, because she seems to have missed the obvious counter to that argument, which is that 4 out of 5 of them will survive. So, she then goes on to say, and then they wanted her to organize straight away to go and have all her eggs removed. They called it fertility pre-preservation, but I call it eugenics. And again, we've discussed this on previous episodes, but it doesn't make sense, because it's not eugenics, right? What she's suggesting is that they're going to sterilize her so that she can't have children in the future, because, well, one would presume that they've determined that she's not a viable, subject for promoting the future of the human race. But that's not true, because the very opposite is true. That's why they would be harvesting eggs, is so that if the treatment does cause infertility, she has the opportunity to use, I don't know, would it be IVF or something like that? But again, this is just, she's being very sensational and very dramatic in order to give the idea. I mean, again, it ties in with this idea that they're stealing her organs and they're harvesting eggs from her. They're using her daughters as a resource, like an animal that's been killed in the wild or something like that. This is the imagery that she's trying to sort of evoke. She then goes on to describe the afternoon of Paloma's death. So she had all that trauma, and she said, I can't breathe. And I believe that the trauma is referring to the upcoming court case, or the potential court case that was trying to get her out of the custody of her mother. She says, I can't breathe. And then her eyes rolled back and saliva came out of her mouth and the rest. I couldn't get a pulse. So I put her in the recovery position, ran and got an airway. You've been in my house, right at the bottom of the stairs. I rang my friend at the same time. I had my phone in my hand as I'd gone upstairs. I took the chain off the door at the same time, ran upstairs, and within 30 seconds, I put her on her back. I put the airway. I did a sweep of her mouth in case it was warm. She choked. I put her on her back, put the airway, the good airway, in her mouth, which I have in the treatment room. And her airway was open. I couldn't feel a pulse, but she wasn't clammy and cyanose. And I began CPR. And we rang an ambulance. My friend arrived and we rang an ambulance. I carried on doing CPR, basic life support. And I stopped to check and I thought, she's not clammy, she's not cyanosed. So I told my friend, run and get my pulse oximeter and out of my treatment room. It's not a cheap one. It's a really good one on my stethoscope, which she did in seconds downstairs and back up. I told her how to put it on. I said, and we'd had oxygen when she was really unwell. It's just one that anyone can use. And it was still pushed onto this table in a room. I said, grab that, plug it in. We put the nasal cannula on her nose and we turned the oxygen 45, 50. It started going up. She had a pulse. And then the oxygen saturations. And it was then that it was 110, 140. And then her oxygen sats were going up on this oximeter. And I put the stethoscope in and held it over the apex over her heart. I could hear a pulse, just really fast. And I thought she was only ever under 7 stone. And she was now just under 6 stone. She'd lost a stone from when she was really sick that first 2 months. And so you'll notice that there's a bit of a confusion there, because it's not clear whether she phoned the ambulance before her friend arrived or whether it was after her friend arrived. It was actually after her friend arrived that they then decided to phone an ambulance. She's also trying to explain that she revived her daughter, that she did have a pulse. In fact, not only did she have pulse and normal oxygen saturations or indicative of life oxygen saturations, but that her heart was beating really, really fast. Now, there might be a problem with this. A sort of a logical fallacy with this is that, well, then why were the paramedics trying to revive her? Why did you allow them to try and revive her if her heart was still beating? Doesn't make any sense. Anyway, she says that the ambulance sat outside her house for 20 minutes after they'd administered adrenaline to Paloma. Why? She says, because they were administering more drugs in that ambulance, and the same drugs that are now used on death row. No idea. Anyway, when we arrived at the hospital, she's got a huge surgical emphysema now on her neck. She tried to say, oh, it's the tumor. I have a time-stamped photo of her taken at 2 p.m. the same day, and that wasn't there. I believe we discussed this on a previous episode. She showed that picture. Paloma does not look the same. She has very swollen features, and she doesn't look well. She doesn't look like the same girl. She's got very swollen face, very puffy features, which when you realize that this girl is actually under 6 stone as well, is like, oh, that paints a very different picture. As I say, she showed the picture and she tries to play it off as if like, look, there's absolutely no difference here. When I saw the picture, I gasped. I audibly gasped because it was very clear that there was something wrong. And that was before the paramedics arrived. She also says that she has signed papers giving her the power of attorney, but the doctors didn't accept it as it hadn't been through the courts, despite having a wet signature, which is an appeal to Freeman on the land shit, that basically nothing is real unless it's got a wet signature, which is just silliness, really. She then reiterates the lie, brainstem death is a lie. You cannot take an organ from a cadaver if the heart is beating, and you are metabolizing fluids. You're passing urine, feces, metabolizing a liquid feed. You're not dead. Life begins at conception. Death begins with cessation of the respiratory system, the cardiac system, and the neurological system. And then decay begins. She also has ideas. She says, so what might cause people to collapse? Well, we know that during lockdown, let's talk about the elephant in the room. What did they do? What was the one thing that was exempt from the boogeyman virus that they could continue working all night? The laying of the 5G in every town, in every city, on top of every hospital, every school. It's on the top of every single street lamp, even though they're not insured. Every single city's now been replaced with LED lights known to make your blood sticky. So you're going to have a lot more people, they've said, are going to be having seizures and are going to be having anaphylaxis. So have you noticed that your blood has been a lot more sticky since LED lights have been installed in the streets around where you live, Brent?
No, and I swear that's the first time I've heard that.
It's the first time I've heard the bloody sticky stuff. You know where she gets the idea that they cause illness and they're not insured? It's from Mark Steele, that guy who pretended to be a weapons expert and tried to take various councils to court saying that LED lights, Mr. Sunglasses, Mr. Former Bouncer that shot a teenage girl in the head, albeit by accident, but that really doesn't make it any better. He also lied about his credentials working in the military industrial complex. What he did was he had a private firm in which he wanted to put, and see if you can see the irony of this, an LED screen into motorcycle helmets that would essentially work as like a rear view mirror or a rear view camera. When that didn't take off, he suddenly decided that he was a weapons expert and that LED and 5G were going to kill everyone on the planet. So that's where she's got that crap from, which is, needless to say, not even remotely true. But she says ultimately that she doesn't believe the official cause of death, and she doesn't believe that there was a tumor inside Paloma, and she doesn't believe that this ultimately led to the blocking of her airway, which induced a cardiac arrest. She says that she was murdered by paramedics. On July the 12th, she and Mike Yeadon, they go on a show called The Sons of Liberty, which she sometimes is a host on. And the title of the show is "This is More Concerning Than Anything COVID Brought." And they basically say the same shit. They misrepresent the donor procedure and they claim that organs are being stolen. And Yeadon says that bone marrow injection will probably, almost certainly, cause a fatal embolism. And what he's intimating is that that is actually what happened when Paloma was given the injection of adrenaline. So I checked. And according to the interweb, while intraosseous, which is into the bone marrow, injection of adrenaline or any substance can potentially lead to fat and bone marrow embolism, it's generally not a major clinical concern, particularly in the context of life-saving emergency procedures. These emboli are common after intraosseous infusions, but are usually small and don't cause significant problems, right? And it is boring, but as I said to you before we started, it is totally worth it just to hear the song that they play at the beginning.
Toxic world, she's gonna help save the day. She's my kind of girl. She's gay, she's right. She's not beautiful. She's gay, she's right. She's seriously loaded.
Oh my days.
Oh my God.
Just stop poisoning the youth, confronting the lies in the house of lords. Calling out those killers in the hospital wards. She's scared, she's alive. She's not in it for the Shemirani, so seriously Hey, yo, let's go. The most dangerous woman in the whole UK. She's a natural nurse in a toxic world. She's gone to hell, save the day. She's my girl. She's
And it just keeps going round. She's Kate Shemirani. She's not in it for the money, but she's the most dangerous woman in the UK. Those are the lyrics. So, interesting. But yeah, I told you that was something. I can't believe it's brilliant, isn't it? It's absolutely brilliant. You can see that, like, when they're recording that, someone's turned around and gone, this is a little bit like Bowie, So, yeah. So the following day, on July the 13th, Kate is up early and she's on Twitter and she's tweeting out, "Wake up. They have no intention of your loved one waking up. They're worth more just before they are dead. Yes, you read that correctly. You cannot take an organ from a cadaver from a dead body." And then she retweets another tweet, which is a video of her spouting lies about spinal movements, proving that you're not dead. And this is from an account called Refuge of Sinners. And it says, Kate read from page 41 of the NHS National Standards for Organ Retrieval from Deceased Donors. Here is an image of that page. The full document is here. Read page 40 as well. So I read the paper, and can you believe that they've both completely misrepresented it? Page 40 says, clinical features of spinal movements in the brainstem death. Brainstem death relieves the spinal cord from descending central control, allowing the emergence of spontaneous and reflex movements from neuronal networks within the spinal cord, so-called spinal movements. Spinal movements are seen in circumstances where brainstem death has been confirmed by four-vessel cerebral angiography. For this reason, clinicians can be confident that spinal movements in no way invalidate the diagnosis of brainstem death. Spinal movements often appear after an initial period of complete flaccid paralysis. For this reason, they may be seen for the first time after brainstem death has been confirmed. For instance, during donor optimization, transfer to theatre, or organ retrieval. Spinal movements may be triggered or exaggerated by hypertension or acid-based disturbances and are often reported during apnea testing or following the withdrawal of mechanical ventilation in patients not proceeding with organ donation. Spinal movements can be abolished with anesthetic muscle relaxants. So that doesn't say what they say it says. In fact, it actually says it can also happen following the withdrawal of mechanical ventilation in patients not proceeding with organ donations. So they've basically said that this is an admission of stealing organs and that spinal movements are indicative that the patient is still alive. But that's not what the paper says at all. It says the complete opposite. The paper goes on to say the spectrum of spinal movements seen in brainstem death are flexor, extensor, plantar responses, triple flexion responses, abdominal reflex, cremasteric reflex, tonic neck reflexes, isolated jerks of the upper extremities, unilateral extension pronation movements, asymmetric ophiohistonic posturing of the trunk, undulating toe flexion, myoclonus, Lazarus sign, head rotation, respiratory-like movements, quadriceps contraction, eye-opening response, leg movements mimicking periodic leg movement, and facial myokemia. When it says head rotation, that gave me images of The Exorcist. I don't think that's what they're saying there. So the paper just doesn't actually say this. She also prints a page from the National Standards for Organ Retrieval from Deceased Donors, and she underlines something which she feels proves her case. See if you can spot the inherent flaw in the logic behind this. Spinal movements are reported to occur in as many as 50% of brainstem dead patients. Please ensure that basically that they clearly understand that such movements do not invalidate its diagnosis. And so she's basically saying that this is a lie. That's the logic behind this. But it's like, but that it says the opposite of what you're saying it says. And so so exactly on what plane of reality are we doing this? It says it's this, so it must mean the opposite. It's ridiculous. So there's all sorts of things that can cause spinal movements after brainstem death. There's physiological, there's neurological mechanisms, and this can happen and has been observed to happen long after the brainstem is no longer functional. Spinal reflexes are automatic responses mediated by the spinal cord without involvement of the brain or the brainstem. These reflexes can persist even after brainstem death because the spinal cord remains intact and capable of functioning independently. Movements such as the Lazarus sign, where a patient appears to sit up, flexion or extension of limbs or other spontaneous movements can occur. These are often triggered by sensory stimuli or changes in the body's internal environment. The spinal cord contains neural circuits called central pattern generators that can initiate rhythmic or reflexive movements. These CPGs can be activated by residual neural activity or external stimuli, leading to observable movements. Medullary hypoxia and hypercapnia. In some cases, the lack of oxygen and the buildup of carbon dioxide in the medulla, which is a part of the brainstem, can indirectly stimulate the spinal cord, and this can occur during procedures like an apnea test, which is part of the brain death diagnosis process. These changes can excite cervical cord neurons, leading to reflex movements, and this is particularly noted in studies where patients exhibit movements during or after such tests. The disinhibition of spinal cord activity. Normally, the brainstem and brainstem exert inhibitory control over spinal cord activity, but when the brainstem is non-functional, this inhibitory control is lost, potentially leading to increased spinal cord activity. So it's actually the brain and the being alive and being functional that stops some of these movements, and that's why you sometimes see them after death. Also, residual neural activity. Even after the brainstem death, there can be residual neural activity in the spinal cord. This activity can be triggered by various factors, including mechanical stimulation. Movements such as head turning, limb movements, or respiratory-like actions can be observed, which are not indicative of brain function, but rather spinal cord responses. Also, certain medications, such as neuromuscular blocking agents or sedatives, can influence muscle tone and movement. However, in the context of brainstem death, these are typically absent or minimized. Changes in body temperature or residual circulation can also affect muscle tone and lead to movements. For instance, cooling or warming of the body can trigger muscle spasms. So this is the thing. There's lots of studies into this. So either we're to believe that basically Kate has stumbled across something that the rest of the medical world doesn't really agree with, and the evidence that she's got to prove it doesn't say the thing that she's saying, but is indicative of a massive cover-up, or she's wrong. It's one of those two, isn't it, basically? So spinal movements after brainstem death are primarily due to spinal reflexes, residual neural activity, and physiological changes such as hypoxia or hypercapnia. These movements do not indicate brain function, but are the result of a spinal cord's independent capabilities. Understanding these mechanisms is essential for accurate diagnosis and ethical medical practice, particularly in the context of organ donation. So just like she did with the heart, she's doing it with the spine. She's saying that these movements are indicative that the person is actually alive, and they just aren't. And somebody actually responded to the thread. Somebody called Jennifer Irwin. She said, I have an open mind regarding concerns about organ donation, but the example she gives is just nonsensical. She's comparing patients on life support, which maintains cardiac functions, respiratory function, etc., so that the organs are able to be transplanted, to patients who have no circulation and rigor mortis present and likely spent days in a refrigerator. These two examples are not the same thing. So Refuge of Sinners decides they're going to jump in, and they say, I understand what you're saying, But the examples of movements that Kate gave here are the same as what is on page 40 of this NHS document. The analogy with the pathologist is not perfect, but she's done it to really make us think about the difference between really dead and not. Except she hasn't done that. She's just simply said that I don't believe this is a thing. Anyway, Jennifer responds, well, certainly I agree that doctors make mistakes, and the incentive structure with organ donation is flawed, like practically everything in healthcare. However, I think that she uses illogical metaphors to illustrate her point. She gives the opposition plenty of material with which to discredit her entire argument. Now, Kate has been watching this, and she's been sort of sat there waiting. So she decides to jump in, and she essentially accuses this woman of being involved with the cover-up. She says, I think you're working with that service. You cannot take organs from a cadaver. After 3 minutes, death begins to occur. Life begins at conception, and life ends with cyan of the respiratory, the cardiac, and neurological system. The entire organ donor is a lie writing on the back of brainstem death. The only people I've ever seen or heard supporting it are those involved in it. And Jennifer says, yeah, I worked as a nurse on a trauma surgical ICU for 8 years. I now work in a hospice. I did take care of patients who later donated their organs, but the donation team would take over their care after brain death was declared. I know many people who support donation who aren't in the service, so to speak. Parents of children who donated often speak proudly of their child's donation as a small light spot in an otherwise tragic situation. Their child was gone, but saved several others. Having said that, if the criteria for brain death doesn't provide an absolute certainty, then we need to cease the practice that it can be. That's why I'm talking with you today. I'm trying to understand what flaws the current criteria has and apply some critical thinking on the subject. And there are other responses as well. James Lynch, who is excellent at sort of calling out misinformation on Twitter, says, you cannot take organs from a cadaver, a dead body, still with this lie. You can. It's the way that the majority of people donate. Stop lying, Kate. He then retweets Kate saying you cannot take an order from a cadaver from a dead body. And James Lynch points out, you can. That's how 52% of all donations are made. So she says, you can just continue. Kate says you could continue to justify your practice, but the truth is in their own documents. And it's not true. Like, even the documents that she's presented, they don't say what she says they say. And so James Lynch basically responds by saying, there's countless times that I've corrected you on this nonsense lie, and still you continue with it, which is accurate. Kate says, James, you don't get to correct me or so many others, and mostly medical professionals who've worked in this, and with the documents from those entrenched it. And he says, well, yes, I do, when you're spouting rubbish. I have and still do work in this. You're wrong, and I have demonstrated as much. So do you know where she gets the idea that this brainstem does not indicate death? She gets it from a guy called Paul Byrne. And the reason that Paul Byrne doesn't believe that brainstem death indicates death isn't necessarily to do with his medical training. It's more to do with, can you guess? His religious
research.
Yeah, kind of, sort of, but in a very specific area. So Paul Byrne said, the truth is that a person is living until dead. He wrote in 1999. No one can change this truth by saying or stating that irreversible cessation of the functional functions of the entire brain, including the brainstem, or irreversible cessation of cerebral activity or anything else is death. In American Magazine, earlier this year, which is 2009 when this article came out, Paul Byrne, MD, a former president of the Catholic Medical Association, and a long-time opponent of brain death criteria, published a letter on the website Renew America arguing that God's law and the natural law preclude the transplantation of unpaired vital organs, an act which causes the death of the donor and therefore violates the fifth commandment of the divine Decalogue, thou shalt not kill. The letter was signed by over 400 individuals, including at least 3 Catholic bishops and many pro-life program directors. So can you see the sort of the internal sort of like the circular sort of nature of that? He doesn't believe that brainstem is death, so he doesn't believe that organs should be transplanted at all, because you have to kill somebody to take the organ out of them, and that violates God's law. Now, in the year 2000, Pope John Paul II expressed support for organ donation and the use of neurological criteria. He wrote, "The criterion adopted in more recent activities for asserting the fact of death, namely the complete and irreversible cessation of all brain activity, if rigorously applied, does not seem to conflict with the essential elements of sound anthropology." The Pope concluded that a health worker, professional responsible for ascertaining death, can use these criteria. Moreover, he strongly reasserted his support for organ donation, calling it a genuine act of love, and noting that he had earlier called it a way of nurturing a genuine culture of life. So the Pope seems to think it's all right, but Dr. Byrne thinks that this goes against Catholic doctrine. In the Catholic Free Press, Dr. Byrne, the past president of the Catholic Medical Association of the United States of America, has directed the neonatology and pediatrics department at Charles Mercy Hospital in Oregon, Ohio. He is also the president of the Life Guardian Foundation, a pro-life organization based in Vancouver, Washington. He has appeared on television's Good Morning America and Crossfire, opposite Dr. Jack Kevorkian, a promoter of physician-assisted suicide. The BBC interviewed him for a segment titled, "Are Donors Really Dead?" Organ donation is a multi-billion-dollar industry, Dr. Byrne stated. It's larger than the abortion industry. Every organ that's transplanted is a healthy one, and every organ that is transplanted comes from a living person, he said, adding that these are taken out of bodies with a beating heart and full circulation. Every single donor is killed in the process, he stated. Although the medical profession declares patients brain dead, often following an accident, Dr. Byrne insists that there is absolutely no such thing. Brain death was false, he said. Brain death was a lie from the beginning. It has always been a lie. Brain death is not true death. Organ transplant is the reason you have to have brain death. Dr. Byrne said that this term crept into the medical profession following the world's first heart transplant in 1968. It has since been defined and redefined and is now being replaced by another term known as cardiac death, he noted. He said, donated organs without exception must come from a living person within minutes of true death, which he explained is the cessation of circulation and respiration. The organs will begin to die. This is why when organs are removed from a donor, the beating heart is always taken last. You cannot get any organs from cadavers. If you're really dead, then no organs can be extracted. So he's talking about extracting actual beating hearts from people's chest, like that dude with the horns from the Temple of Doom. Which, So anyway, AAP Fact Check had a response to this. It says a viral video suggests that brain death is a lie and that all that brain dead patients can breathe and have a beating heart. This is very misleading. Brain death is widely recognized medical condition. While medical definitions differ slightly, brain death is the total and permanent cessation of the brain function. A brain dead person can only breathe and maintain a heartbeat with the assistance of a life support machine. And so this is the fundamental flaw that he has in his argument. That he says you're not dead until you stop breathing and your heart beating. It is the brain function that allows the breathing and the heart beating to continue. So he's actually got it ass backwards. He's saying that people who are on life support should be considered still alive, even if you were to took them off that life support, they would die. Anyway, 1 minute 24-second viral video is a heavily edited version of a 1 hour 15-minute video featuring neonatologist Paul Byrne. In the long video, he sets out an argument that brain death does not equate to the biological death of a human being, which does continue to be the subject of academic debate. However, the shorter video provides a misleading summation of his argument, suggesting the medical condition is a fiction and that brain dead people can still breathe and have a beating heart. He says in the video, everyone who's called brain dead has a beating heart, circulation and respiration. If they didn't have that, you wouldn't have to call them brain dead, would you? You would call them dead. Which is, again, don't be stupid. Cassandra Sozik, a consultant neurologist, told AAP Fact Check that brain death is a specific medical condition distinct from coma or being in a vegetative state. She explained that brain death occurs when brain cells and brainstem reflexes are no longer functioning and a person is only breathing and their heart beating because of external life support machines. This is different from a coma, where the patient is unconscious but still has functioning brain cells and can breathe independently and could regain consciousness. She says that 2 doctors need to independently verify specific criteria to diagnose brain death. You would have to be in a coma for starters, so completely unconscious, and you would have to have no brainstem activity. So they're just wrong. They're just wrong, and they've got absolutely nothing to back it up other than them saying so. On July the 15th, Kate Shemirani tweeted out an apparent text message from Paloma to Sebastian. She says, "This is my son Sebastian on the 22nd of the 10th, 23, also being invited over for dinner by Paloma on our home on the 2nd of the 4th, 2024. Is he compromised? What on earth is happening to him? And he is under great pressure from some greater authority." So you must remember that she's basically trying to imply that MI5 or MI6 tapped up her one, if not both, of her sons, and that they're actively working against her on behalf of the government, who, you must remember, connected to the NHS, murdered her daughter and then tried to cover it up. Essentially because Kate is so brilliant and great. That's why there's this attack on her. That's it. That's her theory. So this is the text message, supposedly from Paloma to Sebastian, and it shows Sebastian. So it's obviously that somebody's texting, and the person who purports to be Paloma text, "Sorry, the dogs will bark during the show. Not a good idea. I'll be finished at 1 p.m. Sebastian responds, 1 p.m. I will be there. On the 22nd of October, Paloma responds, "Gloria South Downs today." Sebastian responds, "Very nice. Thank you for the bread yesterday. We all enjoyed it with some organic butter." Then on the 5th of November, Paloma texts Sebastian, "The best place to be at sunset. Do you need any furniture for your flat?" No response. On the 2nd of April, and this is where you might spot something. On the 2nd of April, Paloma texts to Sebastian, "Hi Sebastian, I trust you're well. Paloma wanted to invite you over for a little something to eat on Friday tea time as a birthday celebration." And then you can't see the rest of the message because it's been cut off by the screenshot. Did you spot it?
Well, that wasn't written by Paloma because it's referenced as Paloma and says, "Hi, Sebastian."
Yeah. So unless Paloma talks in the third person, it's clearly Kay texting him, which begs the question, why would you lie about that? That's bizarre. The following day, on July the 17th, she somewhat ups the ante, and Kate Shemirani tweets out, "This is a message from my 82-year-old mum and the nana to my children." So this is the grandma of Paloma, Sebastian, and Gabriel. "Just to let everyone know who is supporting my daughter, Sebastian and Gabriel have told the biggest load of lies about this. They had a great childhood, much better than most, as their father had a well-paid job. Their mum didn't have to work, so was there for them all 24/7. I just don't understand why they're out to destroy their mum, and even worse, their behavior towards Paloma while she was alive, and now destroying memories of her now with their blatant lies. Keep on supporting Kate." And this is all starting to get very grubby and a little bit unnecessary, to be quite honest. Gabriel and Sebastian respond to this by saying that they haven't actually had any contact with a gran in years. So it's what they suggest is that this person doesn't know anything about the situation. They've not spoken to her for years. They seriously doubt that Paloma had spoken to them for years. And so what they're suggesting is that essentially Kate has employed her elderly mother to try and denigrate the reputation of her sons in order to make it seem that she is the wronged party in this. Now, somebody tweets to Sebastian, does your mother actually believe any of the things that she says? And Sebastian responds by saying, this is a very important question. My mother does not have beliefs in the same way that normal people do. She's not your average conspiracy theorist. Growing up, there were endless times I watched her not only change her mind in seconds, but fully believe whatever new thing she was saying, despite saying something that contradicted it seconds ago. You can see it in her eyes. Gabriel and I remember this well. She does this with her political views and also the web of lies she spins for her personal life. For example, it's how she hid the physical abuse she subjected me to. I'd get teachers, neighbors, and police to question her, but she convinced them every time. She can change her beliefs like flicking a switch, with all the facial expressions, emotional investment, and moral outrage when doubted that you expect from a normal person. She uses this skill to believe whatever views benefit her most at that single moment. So, yeah. He goes on to say, she isn't just a liar or a lunatic. She's a semi-talented psychopath. I say semi because anyone who grew up with narcissistic personality disorder parents can see through it easily. It takes some training for the average person to see. Look at her spin on how she killed my sister Paloma. First, it was Paloma's fault that she had cancer. Yep, that's what she told my sister. Then the NHS murdered Paloma because Paloma was proving that cancer could be cured naturally. Then Paloma didn't have cancer, but for some reason the NHS murdered her anyway. The story will keep changing to suit Kay, and Kay will believe what she's saying in the way her sick mind is capable of beliefs at every step. So to answer your question, her mind is broken in a way that you can't fully understand unless you've spent years around her. She believes everything and nothing. But in the end, it's all for money, fame, and clout. She's a psycho grifter, but a grifter nonetheless. On July the 18th, the inquest into Paloma's death begins. And there's a journalist is the wrong word. Twat is the correct word, called Will Coleshill of a channel called GB Resistance. And he decides that the best use of his time is to go along to this inquest. And he records, or he tweets afterwards and records a video. And the tweet says, Paloma Shemirani, daughter of Kate Shemirani, midway of day one. Shocking. NHS doctor narrative effectively calls Paloma a liar in Paloma's signed court statement preceding her death, which isn't what was said, but anyway. So he posts a video, and in this, Will Coleshill says, hello, and welcome to outside of Kent Midway Coroner's Court, where we may see the BBC hit piece on Kate Shemirani blown apart today. I've been down, I've been inside the court. This is my mid-wave report through the first day of the court. We may also see the NHS narrative crumble. It's going to be a very interesting day in court, especially this afternoon. One of the first things that I noticed was the ex-boyfriend, Ander. When we were logging ourselves into the book, he just wrote down boyfriend. So Ander wrote himself in as Paloma's boyfriend, despite having been dumped by her, and despite this, from what I am told, ongoing sexual assault allegations against him. We've seen Dr. Mohan, who was one of the original doctors treating Paloma, testify that she seemed very clear on how, despite not having examined Paloma herself, given all the information she needed, and she relied on what other people have heard. However, when talking about Paloma making her own choice and choosing a natural path, suddenly he became very hesitant and hazy. Now she's made it clear that Paloma gave informed consent. This directly contradicts what Paloma said in signed High Court statements when her brothers took Paloma to court and tried to take away her medical bodily autonomy. I can actually read you a statement here if you give me 1 second, which is signed, the signed statement of Paloma Shemirani. I was held in Maidstone Hospital between the 22nd of December 2023 and the 24th of December 2023, and at no point during my hospital stay did I say to anyone that I want to do chemotherapy, nor did I ever imply it. Now, this is the signed statement to the High Court. So effectively, it appears that Dr. Mohan is calling Paloma Shemirani, the girl whose inquest this is into her death, a liar, and arguing against the evidence. This is just one statement, but there's multiple statements, diary entries, there's relatives and friends that would also be in Paloma Shemirani's favour. So it's going to be very, very interesting today. And what we're going to see is hopefully those statements can be read out in court and put into the court. I was quite shocked that the mainstream media had absolutely no clue about podcasts that are done with Kate, where we expose these statements, where we put this out to the public. But I guess that's what you get from the mainstream media. Yeah, he's angry that the mainstream media and the coroner don't watch GB Resistance. And what was that other one with that twat? I can't remember. But he's also lying about what they showed in these podcasts. But anyway, they really don't know what's going on. I mean, there was a local guy here who seemed very nice and affable, but he's already headed off. He's just gone. He's just gone. We've got a guy down that we've got from the BBC down here, and I don't know whether they're still around, but this seems to be the most important of our day, part of our day coming up, where you're going to hopefully get these statements read in court. There's going to be a fight of how much he's going to be in and how much he's going to be allowed to be admitted. And there will be chances to question Dr. Mohan from the interested party, which includes Kate herself. So we're probably going to see a very interesting afternoon here at the court. We could see these statements included anyway, but keep pilled. I'll do another report afterwards, and we're going to continue following the trial. I believe the next day is not until the 28th, but I'll be doing another report this afternoon. Thank you. Keep your eyes peeled. Make sure you watch the podcast if you haven't seen it. And yeah, if you want to support us, please support us. There are links. That's a link tree. So I can keep coming out, doing this and reporting on the news because, well, we're the only alternatives down here. All the best. So details of the inquest start to come out. And can you believe it's not entirely how Will Coleshaw has represented it? The BBC News wrote the article, Uckfield woman died after seeking alternative cancer treatment. Dr. Arandoya Mohan, a consultant haematologist at Maidstone Hospital, told the inquest that she was concerned that the former nurse turned conspiracy theorist was influencing her daughter's refusal for treatment. Dr. Mohan told the inquest, I didn't want to discuss with Mum because I didn't think it would be helpful to her. Alison Hewitt, who's the counsel to the inquest, later asked, were there concerns that Ms. Shemirani was influencing Paloma? And Dr. Mohan replied, that's right. She told the inquest that Ms. Shemirani had mentioned wanting to be her daughter's power of attorney and was asking for copies of her blood records. Cross-examining Dr. Mohan, Ms. Shemirani said that her daughter's account of her treatment at Maidstone Hospital refutes everything that the witness said in evidence. Ms. Shemirani said that Dr. Mohan kept trying to contact Paloma after she declined chemotherapy. When asked about this, Dr. Mohan said, yes, it's my duty of care to treat her. Dr. Mohan had told Paloma in December 2023 that she had an 80% chance of recovery if she had chemotherapy, adding to that she didn't initially have any concerns raised by Paloma about going ahead with the treatment. She told the inquest that she had recommended steroids and a PET, positron emission tomography scan, adding that Paloma nodded in agreement. But soon after that, Paloma told Dr. Mohan that she'd not made up her mind about the treatment and wished to explore other options. Ms. Hewitt asked Dr. Mohan if she'd questioned Paloma on whether the decision was influenced by anyone. Dr. Mohan said that she was very confident it was all her own decision and she was not influenced. But so fine. What Paloma said there is that she's come to her own decision. Now, whether she didn't mention that Kate had already texted her and that her dad had already texted her and told her to refuse chemotherapy, it doesn't really matter because we're responding to what Will Coleshaw said, that what he said is that Paloma's a liar. He's not said that Paloma's a liar. It's very clear that she changed her mind. She initially nodded in agreement and then decided that she wanted to wait and think about it. Whether that was influenced by her own beliefs or whether that was influenced by her parents, we don't know at this stage. There is evidence that you could use to suggest that either was possible, but that's not what was being said. So again, they're being disingenuous with what they're actually saying. The Daily Mail Online published, medics feared anti-vax mother had talked her model daughter out of chemotherapy before her cancer death at 23. Health workers raised concerns that an anti-vax mother had talked her daughter out of chemotherapy before her death from cancer at the age of 23, an inquest had heard. An inquest into her death heard that medics did raise safeguarding concerns that Paloma may be influenced by her mother after she asked for time to think about chemotherapy. A nurse specializing in teenage and adult care had arranged to meet Paloma in the following days because of unexpected family circumstances and interference with the treatment. However, by the time of the meeting, Paloma had self-discharged. Nurses had also raised concerns about safeguarding after a report mentioned that there had been a history of physical abuse between Paloma and her mother, which had caused the young woman to move out of her family home, the inquest heard. Which is interesting because if there's a report, that means that it didn't come from Gabriel or Sebastian, which is what Kay has claimed. She says that never happened. That's a lie. Gabriel and Sebastian have claimed that social services were involved. This tends to suggest that is the case. During the questioning, which took over an hour, Ms. Shemirani referred to herself as an independent and qualified nurse practitioner, telling the coroner that she was qualified to discuss medical information. Yet the coroner, Catherine Wood, spoke up to correct Ms. Shemirani and to tell the inquest that she was struck off by the Nursing and Midwifery Council in 2021. After being given an hour and a half to ask Dr. Mohan questions, Ms. Shemirani was placed on a mute on the online courtroom after she continued to speak after her allotted time. So, which is really embarrassing. She's had to be cut off by the court because she was literally shouting. Her son Gabriel was then given an opportunity to speak, where he firstly apologized for his mother's behavior. Paloma's twin said, "I would firstly like to apologize for my mum's disrespectful conduct." He went on to ask Dr. Mohan if she had directly seen any cohesive behavior. The doctor told that should be coercive. The Daily Mail's misspelt that. The doctor told the inquest there was no cohesion that we could prove, or maybe it is cohesion, but there was more than one instance from the mum saying that would use the power of attorney to act on behalf of Paloma, and her wanting to see blood results for herself and wanting to be considered the next of kin, as well as the alleged abuse of physical abuse at home. The doctor added that she was concerned that Paloma had changed her mind so soon after going home to consider the treatment plan. She added, "I was quite concerned because at the time in the hospital, she had not declined chemotherapy. But a few days after being discharged, she declined in 4 or 5 days' time. I was quite disappointed with that. So now we're getting a bit of inference of the timeline. So she initially agreed to it or didn't decline it. Then she must have received the text from her parents, at which point Kate Shemirani turned up at the hospital, asked to become power of attorney and next of kin, asked to see the histology, and took Paloma home. This was after Anders' mother had tried to take her home, if you remember, but Kate had refused and said that she'd taken her back to her house. So, although the doctor didn't see any coercion, which is what has been picked up here, the concern was, I'll say, her decision was something that I was not expecting, that she would completely decline treatment. I thought that she would have a think and continue with the treatment. Inquest into the death of Paloma Shemirani after refusing cancer treatment at Maidstone Hospital. He is concerned that her mother influenced her. And this was from the Kent Online newspaper. Arandoya Mohan, a consultant hematologist at Maidstone Hospital, confirmed with medical records that Paloma had first reported to Maidstone Hospital in October 2023 with a right-sided chest pain and shortness of breath. She presented again on December the 3rd with similar symptoms and was given a CT scan. which revealed a significantly large mass measuring 6 centimeters by 5 centimeters by 7 centimeters on the right side of her chest. It was close to her heart, and the mass was displacing the aortic arch. A biopsy was carried out, which revealed the mass to be non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a cancer of the lymph nodes. She recalled telling Paloma of the diagnosis, the treatment, and also the possible side effects, which could include nausea, vomiting, hair loss, but also sometimes damage to heart and kidney functions and to fertility. She told Paloma she could be offered fertility preservation or the freezing of her eggs, and she said that Paloma had been happy to take up that offer. Dr. Mohan said that the 23-year-old had raised no concerns. So it's clear to see that Will Coleshaw is not representing what happened entirely accurately. And we're also starting to see more of the actual facts of what happened to Paloma at the hospital, what the timeline was, and what her actual symptoms were. And they're saying that there was very clearly a tumor there. On the second day of the inquest, Will Coleshaw tweets out, Paloma Shemirani, inquest part 2, Kate Shemirani, fiery clash, all in caps, with coroner. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, fire emoji, fire emoji, fire emoji. Because apparently this bloke is a secondary school student. Okay, now it's time to wrap up. This is what he says in the video. Court has wrapped up for today, and we've seen some really fiery scenes here at Kenton Midway Coroner's Court for the inquest into Paloma Shemirani's death. Kate had been battling with the coroner over video link, getting muted multiple times, asking question after question of Dr. Mohan, one of the key doctors who is testifying in the case. It was absolutely astonishing. Honestly, like volley after volley from Kate Shemirani, you saw the coroner stepping in to almost stop her from making her statements to set up her questions. Kate was reading from her daughter's statements that she made when her sons tried to take away their sister's liberty. And Kate had been asking a number of questions about procedure and why her daughter was not given a wristband. Why was it that her daughter wasn't asked to sign a form before she was given any drugs, as she should have been according to the hospital policy? Why was it that there weren't further tests done given the fact that there was a differential diagnosis? That's because you took her out of the hospital, is the answer to all of those questions. Anyway, why was it that certain drugs were provided given the potential of heart problems and where she had a growth in her chest? These have been really interesting questions. And most of all, there's a very interesting question as to what is going on with Dr. Mohan. This is the last day that he can appear, which is going on. This is a question that we've been asked by many people. And I think there's no more testimony to this question, which was extremely interesting. Kate also pursued the line asking why Dr. Mohan, once her daughter had discharged herself, kept trying to get her to take chemotherapy rather than a natural route, and essentially pressured her daughter into her opinion. The fucking irony. Now all of this is backed up by the statements that Paloma made. It's been a very interesting day, but this is just part one. Obviously, if you haven't seen the podcast, you know how a lot of this goes. Paloma left, went to live with her mother. Her mother looked after her, but there were further complications, and there was a much worse further incident leading to her death. But this may just be the start of the road. We'll see where it goes. We're going to be back down here to cover this court case again. It's been interesting. However, as I said earlier, many of them have buggered off fairly early, and we're the last ones here, the last ones covering it, the only independent media. So if you like what we're doing, yada, 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 Patreon, wank, wank, wank. Anyway, Kate reposts this video and tweets out, the coroner is a public official paid by the taxpayer and is therefore accountable to the public she serves. Her duty is to conduct proceedings with openness, transparency, and impartiality. It is wholly inappropriate and indeed disrespectful for a coroner to roll her eyes while an interested person, a grieving mother, is raising serious questions about the medical evidence, particularly when I questioned a key witness such as Dr. Mohan. I was compelled to chastise her on 2 separate occasions for this behavior. This is the coroner that we're talking about. Such conduct undermines the dignity of the court. That's true, but not in the sense that she means. Such conduct undermines the dignity of the court, breaches the obligation to treat all participants with respect, and raises serious concerns about bias and procedural fairness. I'm not having it. Mohan legged it. I bet her case and her flight bag were parked outside the course. So there's several things here, right? One, okay, she's been ranting and raving to the point where the coroner has rolled her eyes at her and muted her. Now, most people would be mortified, thinking, well, this is terribly embarrassing. This isn't how an adult or a professional person or a serious person conducts themselves. But for some reason, Kate has decided that this sort of petulant response, this sort of childish tantrum, is somehow an indicator that she is righteous and is holding truth to power, which it isn't. She's also suggesting that there's something suspicious about Dr. Mohan basically having a life outside of this court case and having to go away, not be able to be there for further questioning. But that isn't the most sinister thing. There is a response to this tweet from above from someone called The Real Tim Brown. And they say, and I quote, "God find Dr. Mohan's address. Shouldn't be too difficult, I don't think." Why on earth? I mean, we don't need to explain that. But that's fucked up. Now, obviously, most people would look at this and go, that's embarrassing behavior. Just completely, just cringeworthy behavior from Kate Shemirani. They would also suggest that essentially what she's trying to do is shout people down, because given a you go, then I go, then you go, then I go, there's huge holes in her story. And so she wants to control the narrative by screaming and shouting, which is not the way that you conduct yourself in any court, particularly when you're trying to get to the bottom of whether you were in any way culpable for the death of your own child. As I say, I instantly saw that and thought, oh my God, oh, that's embarrassing. Not only your behavior, but the admission of that behavior and the lack of self-awareness that you think that this is some way impressive. And a lot of people also responded like adults would. There was one person, though, who decided that she was actually very proud of Kate Shemirani and the way that she'd behaved by screaming and acting like a brat in court. Do we know which person this was?
I've got two guesses. One is going to be Sonia Poulton. The other is going to be Jackie Devoy.
It was Jackie Devoy. Yes.
Okay.
Jackie Devoy tweeted out, and see if you can notice the flaws in this logic. Despicable behavior from a coroner. Well done to Kate Shemirani for pulling her up on it. One of the key witnesses, Dr. Mohan, has now left the country on holiday. It's not suspicious. She's gone on holiday. These doctors seem to have a habit of this during or immediately before or after inquests. The same thing happened in the Dimmock
inquest. Hold on. Before, during, or after. Yeah,
at some point.
That's how life happens.
Like, yeah.
We get a rewind. Bring it back. I want to hear the whole thing again. Bring it back. Spit the bars again.
Despicable behavior from a coroner. Well done to Kate Shemirani for pulling her up on it. One of the key witnesses, Dr. Mohan, has now left the country. These doctors seem to have a habit of doing this during or immediately before or after inquests. The same happened in the Dimmock inquest, to be resumed on August the 11th at Southwark Coroner's Court. Fucking hell. Like, so hang on, like, but if it's going to be resumed in August, it doesn't matter that they've left the country. They're going back. You can ask further questions if anyway, she finds this going out of the country very, very suspicious. And one of Jackie Devoy's followers, called Armand AJ, has thoughts on this. This is where she thinks Dr. Mohan might be. She says, or he says, I have a feeling. My intuition is screaming that she, Dr. Mohan, has been taken away by the military for a tribunal. So what she thinks is going to happen is that in some sort of...
We got a QAnon her.
We've got a QAnon her. Yeah, she's going to be taken away and either Guantanamo Bay'd or executed away from the public eye, which serves absolutely no purpose at all. So anyway, on July the 20th, Kate Shemirani continues with her nonsense. The best organ donors are under 30 years of age with a beating heart, a circulation, and on a ventilator. You cannot take an organ from a cadaver, from a dead body. Someone has to be very much alive. You are not anesthetized, as this will damage the organs. You are just paralyzed. You feel all of it. You just do not live to tell the tale. So tell me, is it right to murder one, to give another an organ? If you answer yes, God help mankind. And she tweets a video from someone called Heidi Klesse. And this is the transcript of the video. First of all, you cannot take an organ from a dead body from a cadaver. Within 3 minutes of no oxygen, you're going to start damaging brain cells. And within 5 minutes, you're going to have cellular death. You've got to be alive to take organs. That's the end of it. Hang on, doesn't that contradict their idea that basically, like, so what, you've got a 5-minute window? If they don't believe in brain death, if they believe that it's breathing that has to stop for death, but they're saying that after breathing stops, then the brain starts to die. I think that contradicts what they're saying, but it's nonsensical anyway. It doesn't matter. There is not such a thing as brain death if your heart is beating. If you are metabolizing fluids, if you're metabolizing a liquid feed, a soya feed, which they give you, and you're having bowel movements, you're not dead. It's a lie. They're talking about the brainstem, where you've got the hypothalamus, the center that controls your blood pressure, your heartbeat, but the rest, you're not dead. It was a lie. That was manufactured so that they could do their eugenics, taking organs from one person to another. Who makes the best organ donor? Under 30s with a beating heart, a circulation, and ideally on a ventilator when the decision is made. When the decision is made to take your organs very early on, probably before you're even aware that they're doing it, because the treatment to preserve your organs is very different from the treatment to save your life. In the UK, everybody became an organ donor on May the 22nd, unless you make that 999 phone call. Everything is up there on screen. They know who you are. This is why they want a digital system. Your entire medical history is going to be fed through AI. How much tax you pay and what you're worth to this system. And that's what's going to come up with whether you're a yay or a nay or getting life-saving treatment. Or are you on end of life care? What age are you then for the organ donor? So you have to ask, what is this? It's eugenics. So I want to find out who this woman is. So according to Grok, Heidi Klesse, MD, is a medical professional with a background in anesthesiology and pain management. She attended a medical school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and completed a residency program in anesthesiology there. She also received the American Board of Anesthesiology's Certificate of Added Qualification in Pain Management. Dr. Klessig was a founding partner in the Pain Clinic of Northwestern Wisconsin and served as an instructor for the International Spine Injection Society. But Dr. Klessig has become a notable figure in discussion about medical ethics, particularly concerning the concept of brain death and organ donation. She has also authored The Brain Death Fallacy, a book that challenges the medical and ethical foundations of declaring brain death as equivalent to biological death, especially in the context of organ transplantation. Her work argues that individuals diagnosed as brain dead may still be alive, raising significant ethical concerns about the practice of harvesting organs from such patients. Additionally, Dr. Klessig has been involved in public speaking and advocacy, including speaking at NCBC's symposium in Washington in 2025. Her perspective aligns with broader criticism of the current medical protocols for organ donation, suggesting that the definition of brain death was established to facilitate organ harvesting rather than reflecting a true state of death. This stance has positioned her as a critic of the medical establishment's practices in this area. Now, the thing about everyone being signed up to be a donor is correct. Unless you opt out of it, everybody is considered an organ donor now, which sort of goes against the idea of them. If everybody's an organ donor, why do you need to kill people in order to get organs? Are they going to be plentiful? Like, are there going to be enough road accidents and stuff like that to provide them? Well, apparently not, because apparently, like, they need to murder people to take these organs away. which they then sell or make money off, keeping other people of a similar age alive, which doesn't make sense, because those people of a similar age, they obviously need that organ to survive, yeah? Which means they would have died, which means what you've done is you've just swapped one out for one. If you've killed somebody like by pretending that they're brain dead in order to take their liver and give it to somebody who needs a liver and would die without that liver, you've just blanked it out. You've not reduced the population or anything. It just seems slightly pointless, to be quite honest. Like, this is respect for human life. This is from her website that sells her book, The Brain Death Fallacy. When is someone dead? In 1968, doctors at Harvard Medical School proposed redefining irreversible coma as death. They did this for several reasons, one of which was to increase the supply of organs for donation by simply calling people in an irreversible coma dead. People in an irreversible coma have beating hearts and breathing lungs, so their organs are kept in good shape for harvesting. What's the phrase that she's used there? Irreversible coma, right? So let's take it as read, right? Okay, that she's absolutely right, that these people are still alive. What is the confounding factor of this particular coma that means that might be somewhat of a moot point? Well, it's the apparent irreversibility of that situation. That to me suggests that, like, what are we talking about? Like, anyway, here we see. Now, this is where we start to see the foundation of her beliefs. I wonder if you can guess where it comes from. Most people recognize that human beings possess an immaterial life essence, a soul, a spirit, or a consciousness in addition to their physical bodies. We maintain that people in an irreversible coma are still present in their physical bodies, and that harvesting their organs is an act of homicide against these vulnerable, neurologically injured patients. These procedures are often performed without the benefit of anesthesia, meaning these people may be awake and aware during the harvest surgery, but unable to move due to the use of paralyzing drugs. Do you see what she's saying? You cannot allow someone in an irreversible coma. You have to keep them alive because there's a soul in there. They're not going to come out of the coma. And if they're on life support, that means that they cannot function without that life support. But for some reason, due to this concept of a soul, they think that that person should be kept on life support indefinitely. It's stupid. It's very, very stupid. Right, okay. Anyway, Kate goes on to say, I've published many more articles and had a long conversation with Mike Yeadon about this. The problem here is that the overdose of adrenaline, which the World Health Organization is adopting the paramedic to, ran by Gavin Perkins from Warwick University, everyone is going to be given 1 milligram of adrenaline every 3 to 5 minutes, up to tennis via an IO in the bone gun. Don't know what the tennis means. But into the bone. Even Perkins himself in one study talks about how the small positive use can only be justified for use as an organ donor. One French study states that after the third dose, you sacrifice the brain to return systemic circulation. Effectively, this means that they're delivering a bag of organs to the hospital because your brain is toast. So whether you opt in or opt out, the adrenaline is making everyone into a potential donor. One document that we've scrutinized states that they will have a go at everybody because they see it as practice. Dr. Heidi Klessig responds, absolutely correct. Organs can only be harvested from a donor who is still alive. In 1968, 13 men at Harvard redefined certain comatose people to be dead as to remove the controversy over taking their valuable, viable organs. Brain death is an ethical choice masquerading as a medical fact, which is ironic because her concept of the soul has to be born out of her religious ethics. Has to be. Has to be. So this is the point. And we've discussed that paper that said that she misrepresented in previous episodes. It didn't say that this is the only benefit. It said that this is an added benefit that you must think about when thinking about the broader cost of trying to save people's lives. What the paper was saying is that adrenaline sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, and is very, very expensive. And so can we justify those sometimes working? Well, yes, if you think of the broader holistic concept of the NHS, because viable organ donation would mean that less money is spent on, say, treating people on dialysis because they don't have a viable like alternative. So it's a gross misrepresentation. And also they post a video of Michael Yeadon, which appears to be from the interview with the Sons of Liberty. Yeadon says, one tiny creepy thing that I can't remember if Kate mentioned or if I found it independently. So the British National Health Service has long called for people to donate organs. And being a fine, supportive citizen all my life, I've carried a donor card. All my organs on the grounds that I could die in a bike accident or just keel over in the street. And I want someone to benefit. But now I have learned that you can't remove organs from a person for transplants unless you still have to be alive. Blood circulation must be oxygen. Blood circulation must have oxygen in the blood. So either a machine is ventilating and your heart is pushing the blood around because once you're dead, after a relatively short period of time, pretty much all the organs are useless. And I think that that's something that showed me and shown you the protocols. And what Kate has taught me and shown to prove is sometimes I don't know what you would call them. But the ER staff that travel, like we have something called an air ambulance. These people are sent out to places where one person can't easily be recovered by conventional ambulances, but they have a protocol of what to do. It seems to me, just to cut to the chase, that if you're a person who has organs that the system wants, and I'm not saying that the ER people have anything to do with this, but if the system detects that your medical records say that it's available, we'll have all of your organs because we've got customers. Then they will treat you very differently than if you're not a person of interest. And then they will just try and stabilize you. And I know that this is true because I was reading one protocol. Right. Kate will correct me if I got this wrong, will she? It said something like, there may be occasions when they're preparing to start to remove someone's organs. There may be occasions when movements that appear purposeful restart. And you know that some people say, oh, that's just neurological switches of the dying or a dead person. But you and I know that that can't be true. They could all be alive. So the protocol says that you should withdraw from the operating table and call the base, and then you'll take advice from the base. And the next paragraph is absolutely shocking. It says, we understand there will be occasions where the team will be unable to continue. And I think that is telling you is that something alarming is happening while they were preparing the allegedly dead patients. And they possibly started coming around or were giving an impression of movement that you and I would classify as dead yet. I mean, that's one interpretation of it. Or you could interpret it with the words that were written in the document that said that this is a thing that happens after death. We understand if seeing a dead body suddenly twitch might be somewhat unsettling. That's it. It's not said, like, in fact, it doesn't even say, but hold fast, chop away. It doesn't say that. It just says, be reassured that these are normal things. Go and sort yourself out, maybe have a cup of tea or whatever and come back. It doesn't say, hold the solder down so that no one else is disturbed by this. Hack the head away from the body so that, like a vampire, you can stop them. It doesn't say anything like that. Like, it's ridiculous. So it says, this is why when it really hit me, you can only remove the best quality organs if they're taken out of a living previously. Obviously, completely sedated with pain relief to the nines, but beyond a no understanding, the active harvesting organs, which is what they call it, harvesting organs, removes them from a living person. Now, I don't need a Bible to know that this is murder. I wasn't very religious at the start of 2020, but I've done an interview on this in the middle of 21. Something happened to me that has completely reconnected me to the divine. And I know what I'm doing is for a purpose, no matter what happens to me. And when Kate described what was going on, they had some sort of ghastly Resident Evil feeling. So I'm sure that's what they're doing. So have you noticed this? All of these people think they're on a divine mission. Now, there's two ways of looking at this, right? Okay. Either, yeah, fair enough, you've come to Jesus, although you appear to be rather narcissistic about it by suggesting that you have been imbued with some sort of holy quest. Or alternatively, you've gone a little bit tonto and you've started to think that you are in some ways the center of the universe. Due maybe to the trauma of, I don't know, a stressful situation like a pandemic. Could it be that? Like, that's where I would fall on that particular argument. Kate says, Micah is referring to the documents which I've sent to him, discussions I've had with him and my published articles on Substack. You cannot take an organ for a cadaver from a dead body. People are being murdered for their organs. So the big question is, are you going to be saved? Or is it going to be too costly? And are you worth more to preserve and harvest your body parts? We have the document that proves this exactly what they're doing. They don't. We've discussed these documents at length. They just simply don't say what she thinks that they say. July the 21st, Kate decides to tweet out, our daughter, Paloma Shemirani, 23-year-old polyglot and Cambridge graduate, an amazing young woman with full capacity. On Friday in the coroner's court, Dr. Mohan, who has now left the country, admitted that Paloma had full capacity, was confident and stated that she could not be influenced and that she had no evidence of coercion. She admitted that she'd never met me. She admitted that she'd been told not to contact Paloma again and the hospital is now on notice, that Paloma initiating proceedings for harassment and medical battery. Dr. Mohan admitted that she had not had a signed SACT consent form required not only by the United Kingdom, but by the hospital itself for administration without consent. In Paloma's words, in Paloma's own statement, a high dose of rasburicase and prednisolone and something else, along with a list of other drugs which Paloma believed to be painkillers and blood thinners, but turned out to be prophylactic chemotherapy drugs. Dr. Mohan also admitted that she had not seen Paloma's ECG and taken a couple of weeks before indicating partial right bundle branch block, which contradicted to give rasburicase unless an absolute emergency because it can damage the heart. I do apologize. Again, this is as badly written as that letter that Paloma sent that time. Remember that one? Within a few days of coming home after these drugs, Paloma became very ill with symptoms of heart problems. Yes, Dr. Mohan has now been allowed to leave the country. They wanted her eggs! They pressured and attempted to coerce her with endless emails, texts, and phone calls until she issued a cease and desist order. They wanted our home. Now, someone responds to this and points out two things. The tweet response says, the way rasburicase can cause heart issues, arrhythmias, is by electrolyte imbalances. These would have been checked on regular blood work in the hospital, so it is very unlikely to be a factor. However, the partial right bundle block on the ECG is interesting. Did Paloma get an echocardiogram as part of her workup? Most right bundle branch blocks are benign, but if she had an echo, we would know how healthy her heart was prior to leaving the hospital. And quite damningly, she points out that, in a very polite way, that Kate doesn't have a clue what she's talking about. She says, by the way, there is no such thing as prophylactic chemotherapy drugs. Prophylactic means to prevent. So what you're saying is that she was given a drug to prevent chemotherapy. It's because, as far as this person who seems to know what she's talking about, she's saying that Kate is just throwing words at the wall and hoping to blind you with science, essentially. So KS then tweets, as a response to this, no vaccine has ever been proven safe. No vaccine has ever been proven effective. The fact that there is a government scheme paying out for vaccine injury tells you everything. Viruses are a myth. They were sold to you to accept they were sold to you so that you accept their poison dart and take your children to the sacrificial altar of Moloch. Now, several things. One, she spells Moloch incorrectly. She spells it with an A. which is not great.
What, Molak?
Yeah, Molak. Yeah, she spells it Molak. Yes. so she's got that wrong. No vaccine has ever been proven safe. That's weird because I've had loads and I'm still here. No vaccine has ever been proven effective. Well, I think we've done this joke before, but yeah, polio enters the chat and smacks you around the head with Ian Jury's walking stick. The fact that there is a government scheme paying out for vaccine injury tells you everything. No, it doesn't tell you everything. It tells you, like with all medicines, some people are allergic to it. My mum's allergic to penicillin. Are we suggesting that we shouldn't have penicillin because some people are allergic to it? It doesn't tell you everything at all. Also, basically, I thought there was no vaccine injury compensation scheme because they were all protected, because it's part of trying to kill you. Viruses are a myth. No, they aren't, you spectacularly silly person. You were sold the concepts of viruses to accept their poison dart. Well, that's interesting because, like, I'm pretty sure viruses existed before even the concept of vaccines were thought of. So the Illuminati evidently playing the long game with that one. Like, it's very, very silly. She then tweets this: Panodrama lies again. Dr. Mohan admits she was very confident that it was her own decision and she was not influenced, referring to Paloma. And she retweets out a BBC article that says, but soon after that, Paloma told Dr. Mohan that she'd not made up her mind about the treatment and wished to explore other options. Ms. Hewitt asked Dr. Mohan if she questioned Paloma on whether her decision was influenced by anyone. But Dr. Mohan said she was very confident that it was her own decision and she was not influenced. Which is very confusing. Have you noticed what's confusing about that? Like, that would suggest that Kate was suggesting that her decision was wrong. Because here's the thing: if Kate was correct and that Gerson treatment was the correct treatment, or that she didn't have cancer and so going to see all her other friends, these clinics that she spoke of, if that was the correct thing to do, why would it matter if Kate had influenced her? Wouldn't she have influenced her in the correct way? So that to me is a bit suspicious, because it seems like you're trying to wheedle out of something which doesn't make sense. It doesn't track. If you were right that she didn't have cancer, or that the alternative treatments, because it keeps changing, were the better option, why would you be ashamed in any way or deny that you were the person that influenced her? Also, it really doesn't contradict in the way that she's saying, because it means that she's an adult, that Paloma's an adult, that she's not been forced into this decision, is what it means. But anyway, on the 22nd of July, something happened that may indicate that potentially Kate Shemirani might have been correct. There is somebody, a very influential figure, influential in American politics, that indicated that Kate was correct. I think we could all guess who this person might be.
RFK.
Hell yeah. Now,
the bear smuggler.
The bear smuggler. Yes, him. He of the scratchy voice. The Independent released an article, and this was all over the news for a couple of days. Like, this was a big deal. RFK Jr. orders changes for organ donation network, as report finds dozens were not dead when organs were harvested. Okay, this is from the Independent. Amid reports that organ donors may be at risk for having their body parts harvested while still alive and kicking, the Trump administration has launched a sweeping reformation of the US organ transplant system. The move, announced by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., comes on the heels of an investigation by the Department's Health Resources and Services Administration that revealed disturbing practices by major organ procurement organizations. Our findings show that hospitals allowed the organ procurement process to begin where patients showed signs of life, and this is horrifying, Kennedy said in a statement. The organ procurement organizations that coordinate access to transplants will be held accountable. The entire system must be fixed to ensure that every potential donor's life is treated with the sanctity that it deserves. The New York Times recently reported that the federal inquiry had begun last fall after 36-year-old Kentuckian Anthony Thomas Hoover II's organs were pursued even as he shook his head and drew his knees up to his chest. Hoover's sister, Donna Rohair, had previously told NPR that she felt betrayed by the fact that the people were telling us he was brain dead, and then he wakes up. After examining more than 350 cases where organ donation was authorized but ultimately not completed, it found that 103 showed concerning features, including 73 patients with neurological signs incompatible with organ donation. The Kentucky Organ Donor Affiliates, a group tied to the case, is a new part of the Network for Hope, a member of the United Network for Organ Sharing, and a newly formed organ procurement organization. Network for Hope has criticized the New York Times for reporting in a page on its website, saying that it was missing factual clarifications and critical context about organ and tissue donation. We are fully committed to transparency and accountability to their regulations regarding donation after circulatory death donation, the group said. Our goal has always been and will remain to meet the highest ethical and medical standards in donation and transplantation. Patient safety is our top priority, Network for Hope looks forward to working collaborative with HHS and HRSA and encourages the development of policies that support the betterment of the organ transplant system as a whole, the CEO, Barry Massa, said in a statement to The Independent. Now, what is this story about this person who had his organs pursued whilst he was actively shaking his head and pulling his knees up to his chest? NPR. A man declared dead almost had surgery to donate his organs, but he was still alive. Natasha Miller says that she was getting ready to do her job preserving donated organs for transplantation when nurses wheeled the donor into the operating room. She very quickly realized something wasn't right. Though the donor had been declared dead, he seemed to her to be very much alive. He was moving around, kind of thrashing around on the bed, Miller told NPR in an interview. And then we went over there. You could see he had tears coming down. He was crying visibly. The donor's condition alarmed everyone in the operating room at Baptist Health Hospital in Richmond, Kentucky, including the two doctors, who refused to participate in the organ retrieval. Donna Rohair of Richmond, Kentucky, told NPR that her 36-year-old brother, Anthony Thomas T.J. Hoover II, was the patient involved in the case. He was rushed to the hospital because of a drug overdose. Rohair was at the hospital that day. She says she became concerned that something wasn't right when TJ appeared to open his eyes and look around as he was being wheeled from intensive care to the operating room. It was like this was his way of letting us know, hey, I'm still here, Rohair told NPR. Thankfully, TJ remains alive and in the care of his sister, though according to the NPR report, he has ongoing problems with his speech, memory, and movement. So this is this seems to support what she's saying. Like RFK Jr. said that people were alive when organs were harvested from them, that they showed signs of being alive. And that this means that the practice must change. And this seems to support what Kate Shemirani, Michael Yeadon, and various other people were saying. But did you spot how it doesn't? Let's look at the incident. The one incident that they actually sort of talk about, Anthony Thomas Hoover II, right? The man that basically started moving around.
It's given me those vibes of like the stories of like a person who gets buried alive or something like that because they're comatose or it's just those things that happen sometimes, but it's not exactly like protocol.
It's actually even less troubling than it's made out to be, because what happened to Anthony Thomas Hoover II? Well, they didn't take his organs out. The doctors didn't remove his organs because when he was brought into the room, they said, yeah, this patient is clearly not in a state to transplant his organs. So nobody had their organs taken out whilst they were still alive. Now, what happened was this guy had incredible brain damage. His brain didn't get enough oxygen, but that happened before he was declared dead. When the doctors preparing to harvest his organs noticed signs of life, he was taken to the ICU. So this isn't a case of somebody. I mean, it depends on what the way it's been presented by RFK Jr. is that this guy was they didn't care that he was still alive. But what he's actually saying is that the protocols to ensure that somebody is a suitable donor for organ transplantation were upheld and ensured that that person went home. It's worse than that even, because 73 patients had neurological signs incompatible with organ donations. At least 28 may not have been dead when organ removal began. So I checked it. In all 73 cases, none of them had their organs removed. In all cases, it was stopped by the doctors and nurses. No one was killed for their organs. So what this is actually saying is that the system worked. In this report, there isn't a single case of anyone being killed for their organs. Also, in 72 of the 73 cases presented, the patient who didn't have their organs removed died of natural causes within hours of the decision not to remove organs. Hence, they were all extremely ill. So the story tries to frame this as if healthy people were being killed. And that's not what is happening. Incredibly poorly people were taken to the position where they were assessed to see if they were suitable for organ donation. And it was said, no. Now, there is a slight problem because the decision to put them into that stage isn't in America made by doctors. It's made by somebody else who is connected to that organization that said this has been misrepresented. That's their job. Their job is to say, I think this person might be suitable for organ transplantation. Now do the checks to make sure that I'm right. So they're again trying to frame it that this person is walking around the ward like death, not even offering chess games, just saying basically, this is it, your time's up, I've designated you. Hack into that person and take their organs. And only due to the due diligence of this doctor who didn't feel right, they didn't murder that person. That's how it's framed. But that's not what's happened. What's happened is they've said, we think this person might be suitable for organ transplantation. Take them to the position where they have. And in every single case, they've said, no, this person is not suitable for organ transplantation. The 28 people mentioned were not operated on either. In all of these cases, the patient was simply put forward as a potential organ donor, but the protocols in place said that they won't be harvested from these people. So it's nonsense. Robert Kennedy tweets out, there have been massive ethical breaches in many organ transplant cases in the Biden administration. It's been found that at least 73 brain dead donors could still neurologically feel pain when their organs were being taken out. The organs weren't taken out. Robert Kennedy is lying. So Neil Stone, who is a brilliant doctor, responds to this whole palaver by saying, next on RFK Jr.'s radar, organ donation. Transplant of organs is a magnificent scientific achievement which saves tens of thousands of lives per year, and he is going to try and stop it. Jonathan Laxton, MD, FRCPC, says, do you not understand the concept of brain death? Our machines can keep the heart and lungs going even if the brain is dead. And Alistair McAlpine responds by saying, Maha doesn't understand basic concepts like brain death. This is just embarrassing. David Gorski responds, I've worked in transplant services during training. For a time, I wanted to be a transplant surgeon. The entire processing is ruled by strict protocols designed to eliminate conflicts of interest, protect donor and families, and to ensure the equitable distribution of organs. Charles Ballet, MD, said there's not enough organ donors. Bobby is a dunce for crowing such bullshit. Organ donors and doctors and crews save lives. So yet again, we're presented with something which on the surface looks horrific. But with the most basic of scrutiny, you find out that actually it's just a really sensational statement by Robert Kennedy Jr. saying that the organs were taken out of these people whilst they were still alive, when the actual report shows that none of these people were operated on, not a single one of them. So yet again, we've said this before, we'll say it again. If you need to lie to bolster your argument, you simply don't have an argument.